Okay, welcome. We are going to talk about an introduction to home and community-based services today. And my name is Maren Christensen, and I'm here with my partner from the Multicultural Autism Action Network, Fadumo Ismail.
انت فهمت كده المشكله يا حبيبتي؟
Yes, yes.
اوكي.
All good?
يعني هذا البرنامج هذا يعني هي بتعمله وانا كمان بساعدها. ولو عندك اي سؤال ممكن تسالينا
Okay.
اي وقت، ما تستحيش يعني.
Inshallah.
طيب يا حبيبتي، go ahead معلم.
Okay. What we're going to talk about today are the different types of home and community-based services available for people with disabilities. We're going to talk about how you access them, and it'll be a high-level conversation. So don't worry if it feels kind of confusing and doesn't make a lot of sense. We'll go into the detail.
Mhm.
فهمت يا حبيبتي؟
Yes.
يعني عارفه يعني الويبر هذا اللي احنا الناس كل الاحتياجات الخاصه اللي عيالنا محتاجينها هتشرحه لك واحد واحد وهتفسره لك واحد واحد ان شاء الله.
Inshallah.
go ahead معلم.
Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about how different types of assessments lead to different services. And today we're going to focus primarily on services that you receive through a diagnosis, which is different from the type of services that you can get through a school assessment.
فهمت يا لما؟
Yes.
يعني حتى لو ما فهمتش نقطة تفهم تقولي لي عشان هي عايزاك تفهمي حبة حبة.
Yeah,
كل
هو بده
الاحتياج.
medical diagnosis مش like the IEP plan, which is the school provide yearly.
ايوه. go ahead معلم.
Okay. So the medical assessment can lead to eligibility for a couple of different types of services. It can lead to eligibility for medical assistance, which is a form of insurance that is provided through the state. And then it can also provide eligibility for state and county services. And that's what we're going to focus on today.
Awesome.
عارفة يا لما الحاجات اللي أنا كلمتك عنها آخر مرة؟
Yes.
أيوة، يعني هتفهمك بتاعت الانشورنس إزاي، وبتاع البروجرامات بتاعت BCA waiver and all that، هتفهمها لك واحدة واحدة.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yes.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And so some of those types of home and community-based services available through the state and county include PCA and grants, which are now being replaced with something called CFSS, which stands for Community First Service and Supports. And then there's also the waivered system that we'll talk about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I have a question.
أيوة.
So before the BCA and the grant, they were not going together. So you even have the BCA or the grant, right?
That is correct. One or the other. Yep.
So now they merge that together with CFSS, right?
Yeah. So now if you get the assessment today, you would either be offered CFSS or
CDC.
a waiver.
Yeah.
But you can access the personal care attendance services through CFSS if you want to. So it's no longer an either or. You can have both a waiver and use CFSS if that's what you choose to do.
Okay, that's awesome.
Because she was worried about if she started the waiver, maybe she's not gonna be eligible to the BCA.
No, you can still do paid parent with a waiver, and you can choose the CFSS option if you want to. So it's a little bit different, but there's some pros and cons of doing that. I mean, that can be a really good fit for some people, but other people choose not to do that.
Oh no, for me, I need that. So, and before they start doing BCA and the grant together, I had to choose like even BCA or the grant. So I choose the BCA, but I got the approval for the waiver like a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So now the waiver, the CFSS is going to be one of the waiver benefits, right?
Well, you can choose to do your PCA services through CFSS if that's what you want to do,
Mm-hmm.
or you can choose to do your personal care attendant services through CDCS if that's what you want to do. And we'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons of those because there are some differences.
Okay.
Also,
Okay.
Molly, can you explain to her about the age? Kind of like that's what the people get confused.
About the age?
Yeah, kind of
Okay.
like the CDCS and the CFSS. They when the parent working for their kids
Yep.
when they're younger and when they're older. That's what the more question is there for the other all the
Yeah,
parents.
we can talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
The last thing I wanted to mention is that like another service that you can get, through your medical assessment is eligibility for Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a separate category, separate from CFSS or waivers, and that's a different process through the federal government. Um,
Yes, we already, my kids,
you're
they
already on that?
already
Okay,
have. Yeah.
good, good.
That's good. That's good.
All right, we'll keep going here. So I wanted to mention a little bit about CFSS is replacing the PCA and the Consumer Support Grant beginning in October of 2024. And most counties have made that switch now, are in the process of making that switch. But that process has been pretty rocky. It has not gone very smoothly for many families. And the reason for that is that the providers need to go through a training process to get set up as a CFSS provider. And there aren't a lot of companies that have gone through that transition yet. That is something that's still happening, but it's taking some time.
Okay.
Empty?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. It's good. It's clear.
Okay, good. And a lot of people kind of ask, like, well, why are we making this change? Why are we doing CFSS? And the main reason is that it allows the state to bill some more services to the federal government. So it's kind of sharing costs a little bit between state and federal. But as we know, like that is in transition right now. There's a lot of discussion about cuts to
Yes.
federal government services. So nobody really knows how this is all going to play out.
Yes.
A lot of uncertainty.
hmm
Okay, so what do you need to know about CFSS? A couple of key things is that under CFSS, a person's spouse or their parent of a minor can serve as that person's support worker, their PCA. If you are a person who uses CFSS, so for example, if I have a disability and I have CFSS, I can still work as a provider for my child who uses CFSS. So that's one important thing to know.
hmm
People can choose to use goods and services that aid in their independence, but we are finding that this is much more difficult to do under CFSS than it was under CSG, for example, or under CDCS. So CFSS is very good about paying for people and time, but it's more difficult to pay for things. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you're trying to decide, do I use CFSS or should I use CDCS under the waiver? Um,
Okay.
Another important thing, I should stop there. Do you want to translate, Fadumo?
No,
Just
no, it's clear,
Lama, you
but
oh,
understand?
good. Okay.
yeah, but I
Yeah.
have a question. Is it just harder because why is it going to be harder then?
There are fewer things that are allowed under CFSS. The rules under like a CSG grant or CDCS are more liberal, I would say, more open to what
hmm
can be covered. And the rules for things that can be covered CFSS are very narrow. It's a very short
Okay.
list of things that can be covered in terms of stuff. Things like, swimming lessons or sensory items or home modifications are much more difficult to get covered under CFSS than they are under CSG or CDCS. That's been our experience anyway.
Okay. I see.
يعني
One
عارفة
thing,
يعني حبيبتي يعني لما explain to her something.
yeah, go ahead.
عارفة لما
Uh,
زمان يعني هم اللي مش زمان يعني دلوقتي ما بيعملوا ايه اللي عنده هذا اللي هي بتتكلم عنه بتقول لك يعني بيدفعوا السمن والحاجات هذه زي حكاية الطباخ اللي كلمتك عنه
أيوة
اللي انت اللي بتطبخي وانت اللي
خياراتك
بتختاري.
غير
ايوه. والتاني بقى بتاعت ال السي اف اس اس هذولا يعني انت بتدخل المطعم زي ما يعني تاكلي اللي هم يقولوا لك عليه.
خياراتك محدودة، هم بيعطوك ايش الاوبشن اللي
ايوه
تسويه.
يا حبيبتي.
يس.
اوكي ما
اوكي
فهمت
اوكي.
دلوقتي.
هلا
جو ahead.
ربطتها.
All good?
Oh good.
Yes.
Okay. One item that you can get covered under CFSS is what's called a Personal Emergency Response System, or PERS. That is one thing that you can get covered under CFSS quite easily. So that would be like a tracking device or a monitoring device if someone falls or if someone elopes or something like that. Like that is
Mhm.
quite easy to get covered under CFSS. But other physical items are a little bit more difficult to get covered. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
Yes.
Like
Okay.
Mary, if they have if she wanted to kind of like the fence in her backyard, can they do that for her too?
That is much harder under CFSS. If
Okay.
she wanted to get something called like a, alert system or a tracker or an alarm
Okay.
system that the person carries on them, that you can get covered. But a physical item like a fence or locks or
Mhm.
alarms for your home, that's a lot harder under CFSS.
Yeah, the lady who did the assessment, the nurse, when she came to my house, she said, "Your house is dangerous because it's in a main road, so
Hmm.
you need to put a fence." I'm gonna recommend it that for the waiver services, so
Yep.
you can get a fence. And when I received the assessment papers, she mentioned that in the document to get a fence. Also, that I have a mold in. Kitchen cabinet because the garage is not isolated.
Hmm.
So there is a mud in the kitchen cabinet. When she saw that, she said, also, we can fix that for you.
That's great. That's great that she included in that. And that is something that
Yes.
would be covered under the waiver specifically, probably not under CFSS.
Okay. Yes. Maybe it's
فهمتي؟
under waiver. Yes.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about what some of the options are under the waiver when we'll get to that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
If you choose CFSS, there's two different models that are offered. There's what's called the agency model or the budget model. So that's one of the decisions that you have to make in terms of which model you're going to use if you choose CFSS. And the difference between them is really kind of who is controlling how those services are delivered. If you have an agency model, then that is like a separate agency who's doing all the paperwork and providing the training and kind of taking care of the administration. If
Mm-hmm.
you're using the budget model, then it's really more like here's a specific dollar amount to care for that person, and a lot more of the responsibility falls on the family to do the training and administration and that type of thing. Some families prefer that, if it's all family members who are providing the service, like they want as little money as possible to go for administration. But some, families prefer like, no, I don't want to have to deal with all the headaches and the paperwork and, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I want somebody to do that for me. So that's one choice that you have to make if you decide to use the CFSS model.
Okay. So it doesn't matter. It's not gonna affect the budget they're gonna give me if I use the budget model or the agency model for the CFSS.
Technically, the budgets are supposed to be the same, but more of the budget goes to the agency and less in
Oh.
your pocket if you use the agency model. If you use the budget model, then you're doing a lot more of that administrative work. The budget's technically the same, but less of it goes to you
Mm-hmm.
if you use
Yes.
the
Okay.
agency model. Does that make sense?
فهمتي
Yes.
لما
Yes.
لو يعني لو انت اخترتي حد يعمل لك الشغل لازم تدفعي له فلوس مش كده؟ ما فيش حاجة
اه
ببلاش.
مظبوط.
ما فيش
Yes.
حاجة ببلاش. يعني مثلا لو انت عندك 20
اه.
وعايزة تصرف ال20 لوحدك ممكن تعمليها. بس لو انت عايزاني انا اعمل لك، انا اساعدك في ال20 هذه، هتديني يعني شوية.
اوكي.
فهمتي؟ اوكي.
فهمت. Yeah.
Okay. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about a little bit is what's called the consultation services provider. So this is kind of where the bottlenecks are coming up. The consultation services provider is the one that sort of helps you write the plan under CFSS. And right now, there are not enough of those. It's been difficult for families to find consultation service providers that are taking new clients. There's a process that they have to go through to get trained and certified and kind of go through all the paperwork at the state level. And that is taking much longer than I think people anticipated. So finding a consultation service provider and getting them, online with all the necessary paperwork has been a struggle for a lot of families.
Um,
فهمتي؟
is this Fatima, is this the same that I have appointment with them on the 8th, May 8th?
ما she have an appointment on Zoom, like intake. They can explain to her what the waiver is
Who
and what
who's the
option.
appointment with? Is that with the county or is that
No,
may be
no.
the
It
consultation service provider?
I think it's a consultation services provider.
Okay.
Their name is Ashura.
I don't know that one, but that you could just ask them, are you the consultation services provider under CFSS?
I can see it on my email, what exactly it
Because
says.
Mara until now she didn't choose one
Okay.
of, she didn't pick
Yeah,
one.
yeah, I picked Ashura because my case, the nurse who came do the assessment for the kids,
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
she gave me a list of um, consultation providers to
Uh-huh.
call them and pick one of them so she can list it in assessment paper that she did.
Yep.
So I picked Ashura because they are the only one who have availability, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave me an appointment. The appointment, it was too late, but because I don't have a case manager. So once the county picked a case manager for me, they gave me an appointment on, yeah, their name is Ashura Consultation Services.
Yep. That sounds like a consultation service provider.
Yes. So it's going to be
Uh,
on May 8th.
Okay. Well, that's
But
good that you've got one because there aren't a lot that are taking new clients. So that is a very good start. The other thing that I think it's important for people to know about CFSS that I don't have on my slide, but I should, is that you're required to have something called a responsible party. And that is
Mhm.
a person who kind of has to sign off on the time that you're providing as a parent to get paid. But unlike CDCS or CSG, that has to be a separate person than the person providing the service.
Mhm.
So for some families, that's no problem at all. Sometimes it's the mom who does the service and the dad is the responsible party, or grandma or an aunt. But if you are a single parent, or if you don't have, another relative that could do that role or somebody close to the family, for some families, that has been a real obstacle, because they don't maybe have somebody that can serve as that responsible party. So that's another thing to know, before you choose CFSS, make sure you have somebody that in your family or close to you that can provide that role where they're signing off and saying, yes, this service was actually delivered, but it can't be the person that delivered the service. And that's a difference between CSG and CDCS.
Yeah, and also the nurse who did the assessment, because I have my sister, she's living with me now,
Mm-hmm.
and she's doing BCA for my son, and I'm doing BCA for the other two kids. So she
Can do it
said,
for each other.
yes, we're gonna do
Okay.
it for each other.
Okay, that works just fine. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I know we've certainly had some families where there are single parents, that don't have another person in the household and they run into trouble with that. Like they sign up for CFSS and they realize they can't do it because they don't have somebody to be the responsible party. So I always just want to tell families about that before they.
Yeah, it is important. I used to have a roommate with me. She was doing BCA for my son, and she was giving me a really tough time. But when my sister moved in here, she moved out. So that's good.
Okay, good,
That's a
good. Well,
plus.
you got that problem solved. I'm glad.
Yes.
Okay, next we'll talk a little bit about the waivered services here and some of the different things. First of all, a lot of people ask the question, what is a waiver? What does that even mean? And where that term comes from is it is a waiving or setting aside the federal guidelines to allow a person who requires long-term services and supports to get those supports in their home instead of
Mhm.
in an institution. So that's where that term waiver comes from.
Okay, now I understand it.
Yeah, it's like waiving the federal law, basically.
Okay.
Um, and then there's a bunch of different kinds of waivers. There's the CADI waiver, the DD waiver. There's also something called a CAC waiver, elder waiver, brain injury. The CADI and the DD are the two that we talk about most in the autism community. So that's kind of where we're going to focus.
Okay, I think my kids they have the caddy one.
CADI waiver, yeah.
Hmm.
That's probably the most common that we see in the autism community. The CADI waiver is stands for Community Access for Disability Inclusion, and that's for people that provide a or need a high level of care. But it does not require the person to also have an intellectual disability.
Hmm.
Whereas the DD waiver generally does require a diagnosis of an intellectual disability as well as autism.
Okay.
So that's kind of the difference between the two. We usually see that the budgets for DD waivers are higher than CADI waivers, but that's also not necessarily true. They'll tell you which um, kind of waiver you're eligible for, and then kind of set up the budgets from there. But that's one of the differences that we often see between DD and CADI.
I see. Yeah.
Well, that's what we just talked about. So we
Hmm.
go over that. How old are your children, Lama?
The older one, 9 years old, and Najla, she's 7 years old. Abdurrahman, 6 years old.
Okay, okay. One thing that it's important to mention is that the DD waivers are often very difficult to qualify for young children.
Hmm.
So your kids are old enough where you might start seeing some of those disabilities, but oftentimes for very young children, they will start them on a CADI waiver and then maybe switch to DD as they get older. And the
Okay.
reason for that is because, all young children require, 24/7 care, basically. And the
Yes.
qualification is based in part on the difference between the level of care that you would provide for a child with a disability versus the level of care that you would provide for a child without a disability. And like
Yes.
obviously, a 1 or a 2-year-old, like you're going to be doing 24/7 care regardless. But as they
Exactly.
get older, like that difference, that delta grows. A
Hmm.
7-year-old with a disability is probably going to require a significantly higher level of care than a 7-year-old without a disability as they start to learn to dress themselves and feed themselves and bathe themselves and that kind of thing.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yep.
Yeah. So that's kind of why we sometimes see kids start with CADI and then move to DD as they get older.
Hmm.
So, a little bit of background information. In 2022, there were about 35,000 people on CADI waivers, and the average board budget was about $4,300 a month. And this is just an average. That's certainly not a guarantee by any stretch. But, so roughly around, 48 to $50,000 a year for
Hmm.
on average for CADI waivers. Oops, I thought I had another slide in there about DD. Guess not. Uh, what services can be provided under CADI? This is just an example. It's not an exhausted list, but some of the things that are frequently covered under CADI would be, caregiver living expenses, chore services, case management. Your children are not old enough to be thinking about employment yet, but there's a lot of employment services, homemaker services. Sometimes night supervision is covered, respite, those types of things can often be covered under Caddy waiver. So that's just to give you a few examples of the types of things you might see.
Yeah, this list is awesome.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, at least you will know a lot of things before you
Hmm.
for May 8th.
yeah, people
Yes.
often ask like what can I get covered under Caddy waiver? And it is a long list. There are a lot of different things that have been covered under Caddy waivers, but it's all based from need, so you do have to identify the need, when you're putting together the plan. Like obviously we wouldn't cover night supervision unless somebody like demonstrates the need that they have to have somebody awake, while they're during
Yes.
the whole night. So if there's something that you think is a need, you got to make sure that we document that when we're doing the assessment. Okay,
Okay.
ED is the one we're going to talk about next. So this again is for people with developmental disabilities. And as you can see, the budget's quite a bit higher for this one.
Hmm.
The average in Minnesota was about $7,300 per month. Um, so it is a bit higher, that's around 85,000 per year. And it's a smaller number of people. There's about 22,000 in Minnesota that qualify for DD labor waivers.
Okay.
All right. And then who is eligible? The person must be determined to have a developmental disability. And then it's, a higher level of care. They have to be eligible for medical assistance. And then, that's a choice about living at home as opposed to in some kind of institutional setting.
Okay.
And then this is kind of a quick list of things that you can get covered through a DD waiver. And as you can see, it's very similar to what you can get covered through a Caddy waiver. But again, it has to be tied to a demonstrated need.
Hmm.
Um, One thing that your case manager may have talked to you about, or they will if they haven't already, is they will ask you about a traditional waiver versus a CDCS waiver, which is Consumer Directed Community Support. And it's important to know, like these terms are often kind of confusing for people. But we talk about the types of waivers, CADDY, DD, brain injury waiver, and then we talk about service delivery models, and that's something separate. And the two options for the delivery models are CDCS and traditional waivers. And they are supposed to ask you which one you would prefer, but oftentimes we see people be kind of being pushed towards traditional waivers without a lot of conversation about what CDCS is and whether
Mhm.
that might be a better fit. But the way that we often describe it to people is a traditional waiver is kind of like eating in a restaurant. It is,
Hmm.
you can only order what's on the menu. Somebody else controls like the restaurant hours. Somebody else does all the shopping. They choose, like when it's open and they do all of the cooking and ordering and buying and, choosing what dishes are served like that. Somebody else is taking care of all that for you.
Yes.
CDCS is a little bit more like you cook the meal yourself. You have a lot more control about what you eat, what the ingredients are, how it's made, who you get to invite, when you want to eat it, where you want to eat it. So it's a lot more control, but you also have to do a lot more of the work yourself.
Yes.
And families will often ask, well, which one's better? And that totally depends, on your situation. Some people really prefer to have a lot more flexibility and control, and some people would really prefer to have other people do more of the work. So which
Yes.
one is better really depends on the family situation. One thing that we find is families where uh, it's a lot of family members that are providing the care really like the flexibility of CDCS. Families where, they're working with a PCA agency and it's kind of outside providers doing a lot of the services, like they really prefer a traditional model. And the traditional model budgets can be quite a bit bigger than CDCS, but they're off also, a lot less flexible in what you can get covered. So there's no right answer as to which one is better, but we just want families to go in with good information about, what the pros and cons of each are and be able to make an informed choice about which one would meet their family's needs the best.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, Fatima, she explained that before to
Oh,
me.
good. Oh, you beat me
Yeah.
to it, Fadumo. You've heard my speech already, huh?
Yes, that helps a lot. Helps me really a lot, kind of like between day and night. It's
Yes.
really helpful. Yep.
Yep. Yep. Well, Fadumo's heard me do this training about 20 times already, so she knows all this. Anyway, so one thing that's important for families to know, and it sounds like this happened to you too, is that families will often, or counties will often ask you to try PCA services or CSG before they offer you a waiver. And
Mhm.
sometimes they only offer the waiver after they make you try PCSG or CSG for several months, and you can demonstrate that that level of care is not sufficient to meet your child's needs. So sometimes they'll make you try, PCA waiver first before approving you for a waiver.
Yes, this is what they did.
Yep,
They
that
got me
sounds
the
familiar.
basic.
Yep,
Yes.
you know this well.
Hmm.
And then like we said, DD waivers can be much more difficult to obtain for younger children, because that difference between the level of support needed by a child with a disability and the level of support needed by
أنا
a
كان
child
اسمه
without a disability, that grows as they get older.
Yes.
And then you know this too, budgets for waivers are generally quite a bit higher than for PCA or for grants like a CSG or a family grant.
Yes.
So, all of the different services are available based on support needs. So, the higher level of support need, the
Oh,
bigger
this
the
is
budget,
Debbie.
basically. And, when we talk about the Min Choices assessment, we know that it's really hard to talk about what your kid can't do. And no family, really likes to have those conversations. But
Hmm.
if you don't talk about what's hard, then you won't be found eligible for the services. So that's something, we talk about in our Min Choices training too.
Okay.
All right, we'll keep going here. Oh, I think is that our last slide? I think that's all we've got on the slides here. Um, do you want to go into the Min Choices training a little bit, or is that, I think we're at the end of our hour, but we could certainly talk about that just a little bit if you want.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Do you have a little bit more time, Fadumo?
Yes, ma. Don't worry about it. I'm ready.
Okay. I have another meeting at 3, but I think I've got a little time here. Let me go get that one here. Whoops, did I just close it? Gotta find my slides here.
Can I get a copy of these slides?
Sure, yeah.
Thank you.
To you.
لما ما شاء الله she like to learn to understand the tricks.
Well, I used to work with UNRWA, the United Nations, to relieve the war refugees
Mhm.
in Jordan for so many years before I moved to United States.
Oh, that's
So,
nice.
yeah.
And also you can help a lot of families kind of they don't understand what is
Yeah,
this,
and
what's
that's
going
good.
on here.
Hmm.
Okay, we'll do this one pretty quickly here, but I think we covered some of this already. Can you see my slides there?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, you can see that.
So again, you've been through the Min Choices assessment, so a lot of this is probably not new to you, but
Hmm.
the whole idea behind the Min Choices assessment is that it's supposed to be a kind of a one-stop shop where you can talk about all the different services in one assessment. But it's important to know that there are only certain assessors that are qualified to do all the
Great,
types
great.
of assessments. So you often have to ask if you want your
So
child
nice.
to be assessed for a DD waiver, you have to make sure that you have a DD qualified assessor.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't know that.
Mm.
And so, again, this process is supposed to help you identify how your loved one wants to live, work, play, what your families are needing. And it's supposed to be universal across the entire state, so that, if you have a Min Choices assessment in one county, it would be the same as a Min Choices assessment in a county in another county. But that too, that we know that that is not the reality of how this actually works. It can depend a lot on the assessor that you receive and where you get the assessment. So I think that's important for families to know too.
Okay.
I think I'm going to skip over the history here. We don't really need to know that.
لما عندك سؤال.
No.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Whoops. What they do is, this takes a place in your home and they'll ask you a lot of very personal questions about the support needs of your child. It's free to you, it doesn't cost anything. Under law, it's supposed to happen within 20 days of the date that you request it, but we know that that is not what actually happens either. In some counties, you have to wait, 6 or 7 months to get that Min Choices assessment. But we think it's important for families to know, like, that's what it's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
It's also important for families to know that they've recently introduced a new version of the Min Choices assessment, that's often known as Min Choices 2.0. And this is taking place in all counties now. They're kind of different speed at which counties are transitioning to this. But the idea behind the new version is that it's supposed to be a little bit more conversational and it's supposed to be a little bit more supportive of the assessor. But what we're finding is that in some cases that does result in reductions for some budget recipients. For example, if you're having a little bit more conversational interview and you're having it with a parent who really isn't comfortable like talking about their child's needs, that can result in, less services or less qualifications. If it's more conversation and less as an interview, like if you're a parent who's not comfortable discussing your child's toileting or you're not comfortable talking about, maybe your child has some violent behaviors or something like that. If the parent isn't willing to discuss those things, that can result in less services. So that's another thing that we really want families to understand.
Okay.
Any person can have a Min Choices assessment who has a disability or is in need of long-term support. One thing we think it's important for families to know is that you don't have to be eligible for medical assistance to get the assessment, but you do have to be eligible for medical assistance in order to get the services. It sounds like in your case, your family is already qualified for both. But the reason this becomes important is because the wait times are so long. So we really encourage people to get on that list for a Min Choices assessment as soon as possible, and then you can kind of go through the process of getting qualified for medical assistance while you're waiting for that assessment to come up. Again, in your case, it sounds like that's, already taken care of, so that's not a need. But for families that are new to this process, that can
Yeah,
be.
I applied for the MN Choice back in September last year.
I believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we got the approval like a couple weeks ago.
Good, good. Well, again, like it is not supposed to take that long. It's supposed to happen within 20 days of the time you request it, but that is not the reality of how this works right now. So,
Yeah, I was waiting for mine since 2012, and I got it, I think, 2019.
Wow.
wow.
That's a long time.
I know.
2012?
Yeah, so around 6 years.
Oh my
I mean,
goodness.
at that time she was in middle school, Maren, and we got it because of she had at that time she have a behavior. That's what done the one who speed her story.
That is
Yeah,
the
for me,
longest wait time I've ever heard. So that seems
Yep.
ridiculous. Were you doing PCA or something else in that time?
Yeah, at that I have BCA.
PCA, but they didn't offer you the full assessment.
Nope.
I am sorry that happened, and I'm so not surprised.
I know.
Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about how to prepare for it. And again, you've been through this already, so this is
Yes.
not new. But one of the most important things to think about is what, life looks like for your family. Like, what does your children need to live a happy and full life? What are the barriers? What are the worries? What are the things that are needs that are not being met right now? Um, to think about the supports that you have in place already. Who is helping you? Are there neighbors, are there friends, are there relatives that help support your child? And to really think about that, those supports that you're getting, or that you're not getting, like what needs are not being met. We
Mhm.
always tell people to have copies of test results, assessments, IEPs, doctor reports. Assessors love paperwork, so the more paperwork you can give them, the better. Um,
Yes,
I often
I didn't know that, but I have a copies of all that in home at home and on my phone, so it
Good,
was easy to give it to her on assessment day. So maybe
good.
that's
You're
help.
you're one step ahead of that. I often tell
Mhm.
people the first time I did this with my child, I had a stack of paper that it was about 6 inches thick, and I gave them everything. And I know
Oh,
a lot of families, especially in our multicultural communities, that don't really focus on paperwork. They look at me like I'm from another planet when I tell them that. So it's good that you had all that in one place. That's
well,
wonderful.
for me, I have three kids, so I handle her a box like an office box full
Yeah,
of the document, and it has separated chapter for each child.
wonderful. You are ahead of the game. You
Yeah.
got it
Yeah.
well organized then. Yeah. Most assessments take about 2 hours to complete. And so we always tell people, if your assessor is done in half an hour, that's kind of a red flag that the assessment's probably not as thorough as it should be. Especially when you're doing three children, like that can take a really long time. I don't know if they did all three of them together or if they did three separate assessments, but
Mm, yeah, they do all the get together,
all of
but
them
it takes
together.
around, yeah, it takes around six hours.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot for you, and I'm sure it's a lot for them as well.
Yes.
لما
Um,
بيبقى عارفة لما you can request kind of like separate, you know that?
you
I
can, yeah.
know. Yeah, it was separate. It was one kid, the older one, he was separated, and then the other two kids. But she called me because she said since they are three kids, I can do all of them at the same day. So we did the important things in assessment day, and then she called me like a couple days later, and she took some other information she needed, but because we got tired after 6 hours.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a
So we
lot.
continued on the phone like for another 1 hour. But we did it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I hope you had something fun planned afterwards because that is a lot. That's pretty intense. A lot of people ask who can attend my assessment, and you can always have family members or friends or your legal representative or other people attend. We often recommend to families to have someone who knows your family well attend a MinChoices assessment with you. And the reason for that is that so much of the support that we provide as family members becomes so much a part of our routine that we don't even really realize we're doing it. Um,
Mhm.
we do a lot of supports that, just kind of become invisible to us. So sometimes having someone from outside of the family who can kind of remind you that, you actually, will sit with your child when they're eating to make sure that they don't choke, or, your child only eats four kinds of food, or your child will only eat food on the plate if it's not touching each other. Like some of those things we just do so automatically that we wouldn't even think to mention it.
Yes.
Sometimes it can be helpful to have someone to sort of prompt you and remind you of things that you do to support your child that you might not think about.
Yeah, and I agreed to that because my sister, she was there, so she started reminding me about
Yes.
some behaviors that my kids doing
Yep.
at home, which
Yep.
is for me it was okay,
That's
but she
normal,
said
yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
normal. Yeah,
You
and
don't think about it. Yeah. What's
yes,
our normal becomes a little bit different than other people's normal.
yeah,
It's
of
good for people
course.
to know. Yeah. The other thing I like to mention is that, you can ask your providers or therapists to attend a MinChoices assessment. And if they're willing to do that, that's great. You can also ask them to write letters of support or just an email saying like, this is a child who, does not sleep during the night, or, this is a child whose, communication is unintelligible, or, just a letter to kind of document and support what you are saying as a parent. Because if they have that, not only from you, but also from a third party, that just kind of helps strengthen your case a little bit. Um, and that's another thing that parents often don't think about is like having your providers write those letters to add to your child's file can be helpful.
Awesome. Yeah. I
You
can
can,
ask them to do that.
yes, you absolutely can ask them to do that. And you can ask them to do that after the assessment too, if you need to.
Yeah, since I still have this consultation, I can ask the therapist, the teacher in the school
Yep.
to do some recommendation letter or support letters.
Yep, absolutely. You can always ask for an interpreter if you would like one. Um, it sounds like you don't need one, but
No.
people to know that that's a right that they have. In terms of what to expect, again, you know this already, but the assessor will generally come to your home. They will ask you a lot of really personal and invasive questions about your child's needs. They'll ask about toileting, they'll ask about dressing, eating, bathing, getting around. They'll ask about behavior. They'll ask about your physical and emotional health, not only of your child, but also about your family in general. And they will also ask about any particular challenges or concerns you have. And one thing we like to tell families is it's really helpful to be as specific as you could be when you're talking about these behavior challenges. So instead of saying, like, I worry about my child eloping, it's much more helpful to say, my child has eloped within the last 3 times in the last month, and one of those times we couldn't find him and we had to call the police. Like being really specific about, what
An
actually
accident.
happened can be
Yes.
helpful. Even though, as parents, we don't like to talk about those things. We don't like to, discuss those worries. But the more specific you can be, the better,
Mm-hmm.
because that will result in a higher score.
Okay.
فهمتي يا لما؟
Yes.
يعني تخليكي واضحة ما تخبي أي حاجة.
Okay.
Yes.
How to answer questions. The most important thing is to answer honestly, of course. But we like to let families know that it's really important to talk about those hard things with our children, so that the assessor understands what that looks like on our hardest day. We often encourage people to think about like what were those days that were just really, really tough, and how did things go? What support did you need? What support didn't you have that would have been helpful, and to be able to describe those things. We want families to know that the level of services for which you're eligible depends on the level of support required. So it does not help to make things sound better than they actually are. And as parents, again, I know we don't like to talk about those things at all, but it's really important that we do in order to sort of maximize what we get out of the assessment. And then the final reminder is, again, those specific examples can be really, really useful to help the assessor give your child the appropriate score.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
After the assessment, you will get a written summary of what the assessor learned about your child and their needs. You can ask for a copy of the specific scores if you want to. When you get that summary, it is very important to go through it carefully and make sure it's accurate and that nothing was missed. And if something was missed or isn't inaccurate, you can always appeal that assessment. You will find out within 40 days of what services your child is eligible for, and then you'll receive a copy of what's called a CSP, a Community Support Plan, or a CSSP, a Community Support and Services Plan, that outlines, the needs for care and options. You will also usually receive something like called a notice of action if they're changing your services, either increasing them or decreasing them. And that notice of action is what you can appeal if you disagree with the assessor's findings.
Okay.
And we do a separate training about the appeals process, but it's not as hard as you might think it is. So we encourage people, like, don't be shy about filing that appeal if you think your assessor got something wrong.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is usually I have some links to the actual questions that assessors are using, but DHS just recently took these down from their website, so the links don't work at the moment. But I can show you the one for the DD screening document. I think this one is still up there, so we can take a peek here. I know your kids don't have the DD waiver, but we'll just use this as an example to kind of show you what the assessor is looking at when they're talking to you and doing the assessment.
Okay.
So they've got this up on their computer screen, and I'm going to go to the maybe the communication part so you can take a look at this. So you can see like they have a bunch of different choices for how they can score your child and the options. Can you see that okay? It's kind of small.
Yes.
Here.
It's not
Functional.
small, Marlon.
It's okay, you can see it.
Mhm.
Functional, speech intelligible to familiar listeners, speech difficult to understand, speech intelligible, unintelligible even to familiar listeners, combines signs and gestures to communicate, uses single signs or gestures, augmentative communication AAC, or does not have functional expressive communication. And so the assessor is going to interview and they're going to ask you lots of questions about your child's communication, and then they have to give you a score. So they've got this little drop down box that says, okay, which one is right for this child? But where this can get kind of tricky, like especially for autistic children, is, what if you have a child who uses echolalia, for example? The example I often get is we worked with a little kid who would say, to infinity and beyond from Toy Story. That was his phrase that he would say over and over again. And you can understand what he's saying, like you know what the words are, but what if you don't really understand what he means by that? What if that's the only phrase that he says and nobody really knows?
Yes.
Like, so would you grade that as, functional speech? Like you can understand it, or, on the way other end, you could say like does not have functional expressive communication because he only has that one phrase and we don't know what it means. So there's like a lot of flexibility in there as to what his score would be. And I don't think parents would necessarily think to say, like, I can understand the words he's saying, but we don't know what he means when he says it. So I think
Okay.
it's just really important to parents to understand, like, there's a lot of leeway there to really be able to describe, not only does your child use words, but do you understand what they're trying to communicate when they use them?
Okay. Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yes.
We can just take another example here. Let's look at the behavior one. So they've got this question about challenging behavior scales, and the options they have are none, mild, moderate, severe, very severe, and unknown. And this too is like, what does that mean? Like, what's the difference between a mild behavior and a very severe one?
Hmm.
And we can look at like runs away, the example that we were talking about before. If a parent says, I worry about my child running away, then that might be like a mild concern, a level
Okay.
two. But if I say, my child ran away 3 times in the past month, and one of those times we had to call the police because we couldn't find him, that starts to sound a little bit more severe.
Veer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and that can make a big difference in your score, and your score determines your budget. Again,
Hmm.
so we just want families to be really aware of how these scores kind of work, and the fact that how you answer the questions can make a really big difference in the outcome.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So that's basically what I wanted to show you about the MinChoices assessment itself. The other thing that I don't have a link to because I just removed them from the website is that when they're asking you questions about the ADLs, the activities of daily living, and they'll ask you questions like, does your child eat? And if you say, yes, my child eats, then they will automatically skip the next 5 pages of questions.
I see.
If you
Okay.
say, yes, my child eats, but I have to sit with them to make sure that they don't eat too fast and choke, or yes, they eat, but they only eat 4 types of food and they're really picky about it. Yes, they eat, but the food can't be touching each other on the plate, so we only have to use like special separated dishes. If you offer that additional detail, then you get to answer a lot more questions about specifically what types of support. But if you just say like, yeah, my child can eat, then you're done. You don't get to provide any more information about, what that looks like or any supports that you provide. And that's another thing that most families don't know, when you do those interviews. Of course, as parents, we like to tell the stories of all the great things that our children can do. But if we don't, talk about the supports or things that are hard, then we really don't get opportunity to provide more detail or description.
Yes, yes. I wish I meet you before I did the assessment, because yeah, that makes a lot of sense to so many things that happen in the assessment. But the good thing, I was so honest with her, and she saw with her own eyes some
Mhm.
behaviors in the house. But it's good to know it like ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, our goal here is just that families go into that process well
Mhm.
informed and kind of know what to expect, because I think when you know what to expect, then you can, get the most out of the assessment. And I
Yes,
think the number one message is like painting a rosier picture than reality doesn't help in this case. It
yes.
could really result in a lower budget than, what you think might meet your child's needs. So we just want to make sure families are well informed when they start.
Hmm.
So that is my training. That's kind of all I have for today.
Yeah, thank you for your time, and thank you, Fatima, for your time.
Yeah,
It
this
was
was help.
so
So
helpful.
yeah,
Good, good. I'm glad. I'm really glad that was helpful. If
we
you
can
have other,
send her. We can send her also the slides so she can.
Yes, please.
yeah, yeah. Lama, can you give me your email address? Are you able to put that in the chat?
Yeah, my first name and last name, LAMAALAMIR @hotmail.com.
Okay. All right. I will send those to you. And feel free to remind me if I forget. I've got another training in a few minutes, but if you don't hear from me, please feel free to send me or Fadumo a note just saying,
Mhm.
hey, send those
Okay,
slides. Um,
sounds great.
Fadumo will tell you I frequently need reminders because I do try to do too many things at once. I
She
forget.
looks straight back to back. She don't take even any break.
Gets a little busy sometimes, but
Yeah.
we're very happy to share that. All of our information is available to anybody who wants it. So, if you
Yeah,
know of other parents that would benefit from this training, please feel free to let them know and get in touch with Fadumo because we do this pretty frequently. So
and that's awesome. Thank you so much. That's so helpful.
you are very welcome. We
And
wish you.
Lama, you can call us all anytime you want. Kind of like I told her also, you can call me even the night. We have time, we can chat. If it's emergency, we can help at least
Oh,
five
trust me,
minutes.
when I have my kids around, even at night, I have to keep my little son. He have some medical condition, so I'm busy
I
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the
know.
Well, we
time
know how
when they
that
are home.
goes. Yeah. But if
Hmm.
we can help with something or if you have a question, like please feel free to reach out. If we can help, we will.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate everything in your time and
You're
your
very
help.
welcome. Happy to
Yeah,
help. All right. Thank you.
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Lama. Thank you, Marlon.
Take care.